Director, I think you were here, you were present when I asked the question, so the standard question, so we'll go with that, and if you would, just introduce your staff, they're with you, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Pridemore. With me, I'm Director Walker, Tim Walker with the Metro Historical Commission and Metro Historic Zoning Commission, and with me are the Chair of the Metro Historical Commission, Mr. Jim Forkham, to my right. And to my left is my administrative assistant, Yvonne Ogren. And I want to call out in the gallery, we have several of our commissioners here, Commissioner Bob Allen, Mark Rogers, Jim Hubler, Clay Bailey, and Alex Buchanan.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. And I'll get right to it. In the proposed operating budget, there are only two improvements before you, and one of those is for $2,200. It's for an increase in utilities. That includes both phone and electricity. That is something we've been running short in for the last 2 years. And the second is for travel and training, and that's $5,000, an increase of 2 over last year when we were given 3. And that money goes to train both staff and commissioners and allows us to keep our certified local government status with the federal government and the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. And I'm happy to take questions.
Hey, council members, floor is open. Council Lady Gilmore.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend Mr. Walker and Mr. Ziegler and the whole staff and the chair, Mr. Forkham. I miss you, council member, when I used to sit over there. Just commend you on a wonderful job. You're very hardworking as a district council member, had a lot of overlays, designations, and just very thorough. So I think the extra $2,000 that you're asking for in professional development, don't see it being a problem. I think it's well spent. So I just wanted to continue to tell you what a good job you're doing.
Thank you, council member.
Councilman Cooper.
I just want to second everything that my neighbor here, Councilwoman Gilmore, has just said. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Sledge. We have malfunction again. It will not.
Come poke it.
No, hold on. We'll get it. Stay right there. Now try it.
Oh, there it is. Google Fiber going on in the council chamber here. So I want to commend the commission and the department as well. And I guess since we're all so pleased with what you're doing, I guess I'm going to ask a couple of questions about why there isn't more. And I know that there were some additional requests that were placed in. And I'm trying to get a sense of, I understand that there is, you've done a huge overlay in my district in the time I've been here, and obviously we added a big one in Councilman Anthony Davis's district as well. I want to get an idea of staffing-wise where you think you are right now, and I know that you had put in a request for either a half or full-time staff, and kind of what the thinking was behind there.
Yes, we did put in a request for a half-time staff person. I believe that's $34,200. That was both to help with the historic zoning program, as you said, has grown just since this council has taken office, this new council, but it was additionally to help with the community plan updates that we do for the Metro Planning Commission. Our office is charged with surveying all historic resources in the county, and due to Nashville Next, there was a hold in doing any of those updates as that 3-year process occurred, and so we're a bit behind. In addition, prior to that, there are some that the Planning Commission unfortunately lagged behind, and so we always did that in concert with them, and so we really wanted to use that extra staff person to do that in addition to go out and try to update that survey work.
As just a follow-up to that, do you feel like, based on the workload you've had the last couple of years, and then being under Nashville Next, like you talked about, do you feel like, I mean, obviously you don't feel like you're adequately staffed because you've made the request, but what kind of, I guess what I'm trying to get an idea of is what kind of burden is it on your current staff, given the current requests and requests you might be seeing down the road for overlays and conservation efforts like you've seen the last year or two, and especially going forward under Nashville Next? Thank you.
Thank you. We are still looking at several neighborhoods for several council people where there may be an expansion. We don't see, I did feel a half-staff person was enough to handle that. My bigger concern is the community plan updates. That will have to wait until we have additional staffing. As you know, the Historic Zoning Commission program has grown significantly in the last 2 decades. And as I mentioned at the mayor's budget hearing, only 3 cities in the greater Southeast have more properties in historic overlays, New Orleans, Savannah, and Charleston. So we really are a model for cities in the Southeast, but that does take a lot of effort, a lot of staff time doing design review. And unfortunately, that program has takes most of the staffing in the office. And so we don't have time to do those other things that are very important, from Section 106 review to event planning to education, the programs that the Historical Commission does. Many of them take a backseat to the regulatory arm in the office.
Thank you. Council Lady Bircher.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for everything that you do. I would like for you to speak to, in the past, council districts, well, in the past, it was afforded that historical markers were included in your budget, and when was that taken out? And I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to get that back in. I have a historical home in my district, and short of the owner fundraising himself, which he's been trying to do for years, he still doesn't have a place marker for that historical home. So I would like for you to speak to that.
Certainly, I'm happy to. Historic markers haven't been funded as a regular line item for more than a decade. I'd have to do a little bit of research and tell you that. In the past few years since I've been director, we have gotten some 4% money for historic markers.
In 2010 and 2012.
In 2010 and 2012, because once those markers are put up, occasionally they are roadside markers, they are damaged, they may be hit by an automobile, wear and tear. Some of them date back to when that program began in 1966. It was the first program of our commission, who happens to be celebrating their 50-year anniversary this year. So they need regular maintenance. And so those two 4% funding that we got earlier this decade, that was used just to repair and replace damaged markers. So we haven't had any money for new markers in quite a long time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilman Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Walker, obviously District 6 and the Historic Zoning Commission have a long history going back some 40 years. And so as the council member who inherited so much of that benefit, I owe a lot to your department and your predecessors, and appreciate the work that you do every day. I want to echo some of the concerns that were raised by Councilmember Sledge, just to ensure that you have adequate staffing to take care of frankly, just the overlays that exist currently. Quite often in District 6 in particular, we do have a lot of development activity that's taking place, either for additions to historic structures or for infill housing. And obviously with the market demands being what they are, the market pressure is to make those structures as large as possible in order to recover the square footage that they need to make the numbers work on the lots that we have. And so that creates a difficult situation for the staff. I think sometimes they're in a difficult position of really spending enough time with those applications that they receive to make sure that they're probably going to meet the design guidelines. And I guess I'm just cognizant of the number of staff reviews that are done on additions in some cases that don't even go to the level of of a hearing. But there's a lot of work that I'm aware of that gets done even outside of the hearings. And I just want to be really sure that you feel comfortable that your staff are going to be able to spend as much time as they need to do on those kind of reviews on the front end. But also, I want to be sure that you're comfortable that your staff are going to be able to do the field inspections to make sure that what folks have approval to build is what they actually build. In a few cases, we have found that that is not the case, and we have a lot of very sophisticated neighbors in District 6 who are architects or things themselves and have, in some cases, caught an error such as that in time, an error on the part of the contractor, and we've been able to call that in and get that corrected. But it's I guess I'm just aware that a lot can happen in a very short time if we don't have staff that are available to go out and do those inspections. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on staffing, as well as on just the staff traveling to do that and being away from the office, that you feel like you have enough resources there for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We did make a request. I'm not sure if you received our 3-year outlook. We have requested a half staff person. We made a request for a half staff person this year, a half staff person next year, and a half staff person the following year. And that was to try to better serve the public, be more attentive, turn those projects around in appropriate amount of time. So it obviously is an issue. I wouldn't have asked for it, but if we don't get it, certainly we'll still do our job and find a way to do it. So I appreciate all you said. I hope that answers your question.
Council A. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Prime Moore. I want to echo everything that has been said about your department. Director Walker and Councilman Forkham, you still have to keep that title there. Mm-hmm. That's what we know you as, and it'll continue to be. And the commission members and all of the department staff, you all are incredible. I can just go on and on about why, but one of the things that I know that your department does is you go above and beyond in assisting council members in looking at possible historical areas. You come out, you meet the council member, you conduct a lot of research. I mean, just so accessible. And you're just one of the few departments in Metro that really, really work with the council members in a very close way. I wanted to ask you, I'm the same way as Councilwoman Virtue on these historical markers. In 2007, there was a council discretionary infrastructure fund where each council member in their district was given, I think, $50,000 for spending that money on from anything from historical markers to entrance signs to the community, like a former councilwoman and now state representative Brenda Gilmore did for Bordeaux. When you come into Bordeaux, you see "Welcome to Bordeaux." And I think over in the Harding Place area, you see those welcome signs to "Welcome to Creve Hall" and former Councilman Atkins' district. Am I right, Councilman Forkham? And that was taken away in 2007. Am I correct?
I am not
and see,
quite
that
sure
was
of
that was
but
before I became a Metro council member. I became a council member in 2011, and I started immediately inquiring about how can I get a historical marker for Grandale Manor, and it costs just $2,500 actually. But if you're not a council member that has just money to be able to just spend like that, if I had that job that gave me that kind of money, I would just pay it out of my pocket because it's that important. But why I'm saying all this is, I know that we used to have money for historical markers, and former council members were able to get historical markers from that council infrastructure fund. Am I correct?
That is correct. We have had several funded that way in the past.
Chair Pridemore, I'm gonna put this on the wish list again. And being considered, we may not get $50,000 per council district for council discretionary infrastructure monies because, you know, things are tight. But I would, like to see some funds, whether that be a little small number of 10,000 per council district, so that council members do have the flexibility of being able to pay for that cost of a historical marker, which I think is critically important to our city. And so I just want to leave with that. Thank you, Executive Director Walker.
Thank you.
Council A, if you would, the instructions at the beginning of you weren't here, so I'll tell you now, or not tell you, I hate to say tell you, remind you, there is a sheet on your desk. If not, Rosie has one.
I got it, Chair.
It needs to be filled out and presented to her, and especially where the funds will come from needs to be, that one's most important.
And I'm going to work with you, Chair.
And that contingency fund was replaced by a fund where just a certain allotted money was put in and I may be speaking a little, it's a fund for charities. It's I can't remember the name.
So did it go to all of the nonprofit, the funds
I
that
think it's a community enhancement fund.
enhancement
That's what it was.
fund
Yes.
that funds all of the nonprofits?
It funds the nonprofits. That's what it does. So it didn't go away. It just went into a different, where we wouldn't have to pick and choose.
Well, given the increase in revenue that we see and some other good financial decisions that have been made by Rich Rieblin and now Talia, I think it's worth exploring and looking at where we can pull just a small amount of money to give each council district back some of that money to have things like historical markers.
Okay, fill out your little form. and
I
we'll-
will do that, Chair. Thank you so much.
Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I forgot to ask something earlier. Tim, would you mind mentioning a little bit about, and I ran into this, and I'm sure many council members have run into this when you propose any kind of historic or conservation overlay. You had put in a request about studying the economic impact of historic preservation, and part of that in your notes is the effect of historic overlays on property values and such. Can you give a little bit of, can you just give the council members just a little bit of detail on what that would look like?
Yes, we were asking for $50,000, and we would hire a consultant to do a historic preservation economic impact study across Davidson County. It would really compare like historic neighborhoods that have historic overlay applied versus like neighborhoods that don't, and assess the economic impact of it simply. That's been done by all of our peer cities. There are very few cities. In fact, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and Memphis have all done that in the last 15 years. And as you know, specifically, we now have many people opposing it who are saying that actually historic overlays lower property values. And there are literally dozens and dozens of studies that have been done across the U.S. over the last decade, and none of them have shown that to be the case. At worst, they maintain property values. Generally, they increase property values. And the great benefit is they leave a diversity of housing so that you can have a diversity in your neighborhood, that someone old who's single can still live in a neighborhood, and a new family and someone new can move into a new construction. It allows that diversity. So that's what it would be used for, and I felt it was time that our city did the same thing because it would be a very valuable tool for our office, and I think the city in general.
And I would agree with that, and I would share that it would probably be useful for us as council members too, because you're right, we do run into, when we propose new overlays or expansions of overlays, that argument comes up quite a lot, and we don't have a fact base from which to, a localized fact base from which to operate. So I think it would be extremely valuable.
And I would like to add, one of the other things that we'd be doing is looking at state law and looking across the country and seeing if there are any new incentives we can create as a city to support historic preservation, which I think is very important with all the development pressure we're currently under.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quick question, Tim, and then I have a statement. How close are we? I know there's been some talks. If I'm ruining the big surprise, please forgive me, okay? How are we looking? I know you're working with some state agencies about somehow getting some sort of reprieve or help for our historic buildings that are downtown, East Nashville, West Nashville, all over the city. Because sometimes, you know, let's just say, use downtown for a second. Excuse me, Councilman O'Connell, for picking on your neighborhood real quick. Let's say we're downtown where I can build a 15-foot skyscraper. However, because Hank Williams Jr. did his first performance in there, or somebody, and it's historically protected, and they know you would kill them, they tore the building down. And then is there a way for we could give them some sort of benefit? Because obviously they're losing. Like right now, you know, downtown is blowing up, and they're paying. Some places are paying the same amount of taxes, property taxes, you know, by keeping it historical when they could build a bigger building or something, and at least get the financial benefit and still pay those taxes. And I know that you've been able to find a good balance. Are we close to figuring out a way to give those historical buildings downtown some sort of incentives that we can help them?
Sure. And of course, as we were just speaking of, the economic impact study would look at new incentives that could be created. There are a few already on the books. One is transfer of development rights, or TDRs. That's currently available downtown. You have to have an accepting area for it. I think working with the Planning Commission, we're still trying to figure out a way where that would be a tool that would be more utilized. It hasn't been utilized in the way we all hoped it would. And I know with the downtown code update, the DTC several years ago, that tried to level the playing field with height downtown. I know Council Lady Gilmore shaking her head because she was so involved in that. And so height isn't as great in those areas that are either already local historic districts like 2nd Avenue, Printers Alley, and the downtown district, which picks up part of Printers Alley, but even those areas that are just listed on the National Register, like the 5th Avenue and financial districts downtown. So we are trying to get a handle on that. There are some tools available. Also, a conservation facade easement through our local nonprofit is allowed on those buildings too. Lets them to take a one-time tax-deductible donation. But obviously, we can create better tools to assist them. And that's what I would hope we could do with this study once it gets funded.
And last question. I know in my neighborhood over the last 3 to 4 years, we've had some projects that, homes that have been on the endangered list. How many do we have now?
That's hard to say, and I think you might be, or do you mean the historic Nashville's Nashville 9 endangered list? They're the local nonprofit, and people often confuse them with our office, and they're a partner that we work with on many things, but they put out that list once every year and prioritize it. Sometimes they're individual buildings, like the McGavick Gatewood House in your district was on that list. Sometimes they're category, like rural cemeteries was on their list last year as an issue. So they put that list out there every year. I would say we're never going to exhaust that list. There are going to always be things that we value as a city, as a community, that we want to make sure are preserved in some way.
And I'm not trying to give you more work, okay, but thank you for helping me get 2 of those properties off the list and redeveloped, and for helping out and going to court with me and getting involved in that on one particular situation that we won't talk about. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. I just want to, again, echo all the many people that appreciate the hard work that everyone in the Historic Commission does. Those are incredibly hard-working people, and I know that the amount of properties you have to review has gone up tremendously. I would certainly support the request for another halftime staff, and we'll be putting that on the wish list because I think that enables y'all to continue to service, and the need continues to grow. So I appreciate what y'all are doing and want to help you do it more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. That's the end. There are no other council people in the queue, so we certainly appreciate you being here and the presentation.
Thank you.
Very much. Councilman Forcom.